Support for FurCast comes through Patreon, PayPal, cash donations, and from listeners like you.
Additional support comes from our sponsor, twintailcreations.com. Save 15% on adult silicone products when you use our coupon code, REDWOLF.
Learn more at furcast.fm/donate.
This is FurCast Tech.
This is FurCast Tech, episode 365, recorded 2020-0402. So, as usual, I have more nerds joining me. How's it going, guys?
Hello.
Yo.
I figure we can kind of jump into something that we all end up talking about all the time anyway, especially lately, because of all the COVID-19 stuff that's going on. By the way, hope everybody's able to stay safe and at home and relax and not have to go out too much. And on one hand, I feel bad for people who are working, and on the other hand, I'm like glad that some people aren't, because it's like, you really shouldn't be going outside right now, because it's pretty bad. But yeah, we've been talking about how it's been kind of changing the broadcast industry, because all of a sudden, all of these major broadcasters have to work from home. And so to talk about that, I have a couple friends on. First is Freeze Badger.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Which
How
is
are
this the
you?
part where I introduce myself?
This is the part where you introduce yourself.
Oh, okay.
You can tell we are broadcast people.
Yeah, we've been doing this a long time.
Anyway, hi, I'm Freeze. I'm a freelance camera guy, jib guy, Steadicam guy, video op, and I think that's it. I've got about 8 years of broadcast news experience, and Jesus Christ, this past month has looked like nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah, it's got to be intense, especially when, because you work in broadcast, so, whenever there's a major world event, I've seen you at FurryCons, when we're together and something happens, there's breaking news, and you're just kind of sitting there going, oh, shit, work is going to be real weird next week.
Well,
So this must take the cake.
yeah, I was at MFF when Bush 41 died, or not 41.
41.
Bush 41. When he died, and literally I saw it happen on the CNN was on, and I saw it and was like, ah, fuck, I'm gonna get a call from the production manager in 45 minutes.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
And sure enough, I did, and I was like, I'm in
Hey.
Chicago, but I can be on the next flight, and they're like, no, we're good.
Yeah, just wait it out. And we've also got Jesse. He's a kitty.
I am a kitty. Hi, I'm Jesse. I produce some XBN stuff behind the scenes, but I've been more on the podcasting side since really early on, and then broadcast trained, but honestly then kind of at the last second in school decided to not do that and help out with event and production stuff whenever I can, but I'm mainly more on the digital side.
Yeah, and you're also, well, one, you're a cat. Two, a bit of journalism. And
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and then also three, possibly most importantly for this episode, you are a huge late night television fan.
Okay, now let's curb your enthusiasm there.
Wow.
I'm cue the music. No, I'm subscribed to them all. Well, not to all of them. I'm subscribed to some of them, and I consume videos of some of them, and I like the scene. I'm not a fan. Just like broadcast news. I like the scene. I follow kind of what's going on, but I don't really work in it, and I have no desire to.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. No, but no, I always love talking with you about this stuff, because whenever there's a big shift especially in that industry, of all the friends that I have, you always know the history of where a lot of these comedians came from and where all the shows came from, and it's awesome. I love hearing.
I read a couple books and a couple Wikipedia pages. Not much more to it than that.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, everybody's home, which, for the average YouTuber doesn't mean much, right? Most YouTubers are just like, hi, I already have no friends and talking to a camera in front of no audience. But for a lot of these people,
what was it that Seth
weird.
Meyers said?
Wait, am I a YouTuber?
Pretty
No,
might as well.
Well, I think it's It's been interesting, yeah, just seeing like not only the transition of the style of some of these shows, like especially the late night shows, going from having a crowd to having no crowd. But yeah, Seth Meyers was great. He was criticizing President Trump in one of his little news roundups, and he was saying, wow, Trump feels bad about COVID-19. How do you think I feel going from, working in this big production studio with this huge crew, cameras, lighting, makeup artists, a huge audience, to sitting talking into a camera alone in my room, only to have people on Twitter tell me that their 15-year-old is better at YouTube than I am. And, it's like, it's such an interesting shift. And it's also fascinating watching the comments on this stuff, because people commenting are like, I don't know if I like this. Like, in some ways, it's almost nice without an audience, and then in other ways, it's like really weird.
It's nice to see.
I think the most depressing thing that I've seen come out of this is watching people try and do their own makeup and realizing that it's really hard.
I think what is it? Stephen Colbert had his daughter do the makeup, which is great. Yeah,
Colbert got the whole family in, and I think it was great because you could see, especially with Colbert. Actually, with all of them, but especially Colbert, there's almost a nice symbiosis with the audience where they're like, we're just going to figure out how this all goes. And you were saying with the comments, you guys are going to figure out how this is going for you. And we're just going to... he did an interview with Daniel Radcliffe, and he just conferenced him in from his apartment in New York last night, and they couldn't get the audio working. So you saw Daniel Radcliffe miming for the first 5 minutes, and they left all of it in. They left the troubleshooting in, which I think was great. There were comments saying, it's nice to know celebrities are having the same sorts of problems we are right now. And then finally, Daniel Radcliffe was like, why don't you just call me on the phone? And so they spent the rest of the interview with their iPhones up to their head.
That's awesome, though. There's been some people who have kind of said that, like, maybe they're doing this on purpose. Like, I mean, after like a week or two, now that we're a bit into this whole crisis, we've seen some of them improve a little bit with like better lighting, better camera, better audio.
Kimmel definitely had a crew over to set shit up.
Yeah, I feel like a few of them have had like some gaffers show up at their house, like, here's a light, here's how to turn it on and use it. Like, stop, I think Seth Meyers was like filming in a hallway, and it was just like, oh God, what are you doing?
Although John Oliver is just hilarious, because John Oliver even said, John Oliver, enunciation, even basically said, he's like, I am not a technology person. My staff has basically been walking me through how to record the show like they're trying to teach a passenger on a jet plane how to land it.
Yeah, it was so great. He was just like, now, I understand there's a lot of buttons in front of you right now, but we're going to look for the red button on the camera. And it was just, it was hysterical.
What did you press?
Was this a thing that got posted, or did he just mime it out?
He just kind of paraphrased it in an interview.
Okay.
He was talking to... I think the first thing people have been saying is, well, who can you get? Then also, who can you get who you have good rapport with, because it's all digital and we don't know how it's going to go. And so Stephen Colbert got John Oliver on, and they could both talk about how freaking strange it's been the last couple weeks, just trying to record their shows.
Yeah.
So a lot of the one of the networks I work at, a lot of the anchors are now having home studios put in. And for all of the robo and video ops, most of these guys are having robotic camera ops just so they don't have to, frame up while they're sitting there. But they sent out a guide of like, we sent the host's instructions on how to set everything up. Here's instructions for you guys so that you don't ask him how to do anything too technical. All the lights are plugged into a power strip. They are only to touch the power strip, nothing else.
Well,
do not ask them to adjust the brightness, the color temperature, turn them on. They are touching
Do not
the power
overwhelm
strip.
these simple creatures.
Well,
So I think I'm curious how they're dialing their own IFBs in. Like, are they having to just have that open all the time, or do they have to get taught how to dial IFBs in?
Yeah, it's just interesting to see what happens when these famous hosts lose the makeup artist and lose the camera op and lose the the grips and lose because it's like, in some ways, they know some of it. They know the terminology. They know, they hear it in their day. They know what each person's job does, and they're all friends. But at the same time, when you lose all of it, all of a sudden that person, you realize how little the average person sometimes knows about, like, make sure your face is like lit with light. Make sure you're not in like an echoey room, and then like make sure you're framed.
I always
properly.
light my face with dark.
I would tell any of these people, use the advice that MKBHD routinely gives in his videos. He's like, all this, I have all these subscribers and everything I do looks good. Guess what? Thank God for YouTube. I learned it all from there. So, too bad there aren't any makeup tutorials on YouTube. Whatever will people do?
Actually, Seth Meyers said he did watch makeup tutorials.
Oh, did he really? I didn't even see
Yeah.
that.
No,
One of our anchors actually grabbed a laptop and from her house did a 2-minute tutorial of like, hi, since all of our people that we normally bring into the studio are now doing it from their homes and using Skype, here's how to not suck at it. First off, please don't put your bed in the background. Like, I know your desk is in your bedroom. Don't have your bed in the background. Secondly, raise the camera so it doesn't see all of your chins. Like, have it at eye level. Have light pointed at your face and not the back of your head. Stuff like that, where it's like, it seems obvious.
I like it when their bed is in the shot. Actually, Leo Laporte was talking about this, who we generally follow, who's firmly on the digital side, except not completely, but his history is a long time on the television terrestrial side.
Tech TV, and then G4, and then now Twit, yeah.
Yeah, and he still does a weekend radio show. But he was saying he actually went on like today, and he saw, because one of his friends is still a correspondent for the Today Show, or for Good Morning America, one of those guys. And basically he's like, all these guys are learning that the reason why people like YouTube is because of almost how domestic it is. It's much more transparent when you're actually in someone's bedroom. And he's like, broadcast television for decades has tried to put more distance between the viewer and them. A glitzy set, makeup, big lighting, big machinery.
Our correspondent joining us live using expensive satellite linking technology. Thank you for joining us, sir. Can you report on this?
It is actual distance, like bad distancing, and the reason YouTube really took off is because you're actually in someone's home. You actually see the way they live. They're talking to you as a regular human being, not coming down from on high, dispersing this to an entire nation. And Leo's like, the best thing that can come for this is that broadcast is going to, maybe never be the same, and because they're going to have to learn these lessons, because guess what? They're now on a completely equal playing field.
Well, here's my thought on it is, when I'm watching someone on YouTube, it's fine that they're in their home. It's fine that they're just kind of talking. But when I turn on the news, I don't want some dude from his bedroom. I want the director of national intelligence, or I want someone important that's a figurehead. And it feels weird to have someone so high up just in their home office, in their bedroom doing stuff. Because it kind of makes it waters down what they say.
Yeah, it isn't.
And yet, half the interviews that Dr. Fauci has been doing have been with Phil DeFranco, Dr. Mike, who have been coming to them, who have been chatting with them from their home offices or studios. Maybe their bedroom isn't in the shot, but I think you're starting to see this diversification and shift.
Well, I think diversification is a good word because for me, it's all about context, right? And I remember seeing a tweet years ago that was like, it was a photo of an anchor standing in front of some building, it might have been the White House or something, and there was lights, and there was a camera op, and there was a secondary op, and there was the broadcast truck and the satellite feed and all this cabling, and then the mics, and it was this huge setup. I mean, it took half a section of a street almost worth of space just to set up all this stuff so this correspondent could go live and report on the scene or whatever. And then there was a split screen in the image, and the other side, it was literally a reporter, selfie stick, iPhone. And I remember people saying oh, this is the future of journalism. And it was this awkward thing. But I've always kind of had this weird feeling about that. Not just the journalistic side, but it's this weird thing where sometimes it's okay if it's a Skype call. And sometimes it's okay if the quality is a little and it's just some person on a laptop. But there's this weird sense of context that I feel like humans are really sensitive to, that sometimes, it needs to be professional. You need to, it's okay to have a Skype call if you also have a news anchor in a proper studio. It feels okay then because you've got that balance and you've got both sides of it. But, I can't imagine watching CNN where the entire screen is Skype calls. That would just be weird, I don't know.
I mean, that's what's going on right now.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's all
one of the Sunday
conditioning.
shows. One of the Sunday shows that I do, there's normally a panel, and because of social distancing, they don't want everyone sitting at the same desk. They just have remotes for everyone, either in a different set in the same building, or they'll literally just have it Skype or a home studio or something, and it's literally just 4 Skype calls coming in, or 5
Also,
if you
Paradox,
count
what
the
are you
anchor.
talking about? CNN has been doing the Octobox forever, so this is
Oh,
not
that's
necessarily
true.
anything new.
Not necessarily having the boxes though, but just the quality. When your main journalist,
Yeah.
Okay, so great example, Chris Cuomo on CNN, one of their top anchors. He came down
May
with.
he rest in peace.
He's
Wait, is he dead
not
yet, or
dead.
does he just have corona?
No,
No.
he just
He just has corona.
Sorry.
he's just sick.
Yeah.
God, if he dies, I'm gonna feel like an asshole.
Jeez, Freeze. But anyway, he
Reports of his death have been great.
Hold on, let me Google if he's still alive.
well, hey, one thing I'll say is if he does die, you're going to be hearing about it over a Skype call, so you better get used to that. No, but even he is on Skype, and it doesn't seem like, at least from when I was watching a little bit of CNN, it didn't seem like they had done much of a home studio setup for him just yet. He was kind of mostly on a Skype call. So here's CNN's top journalist in the main box, right? You got your interview people, right, in the little small boxes, but then there's him also on a Skype call, and it's just huh. But so what?
I think it's all context. I think it's all context and conditioning. It's the same thing with people talk about frame. What frame rate do you want to see your movies at? And we're kind of a little bit.
The answer is
it
24p,
strikes-
and that's the only answer.
Exactly, but it's that way because you've seen that since you were a kid. We are conditioned to believe that things should be this way and the interaction should be like this. But people who are younger than us, who grew up more with YouTube and think, well, okay, that's the way they consume most of their content, for them, it's a much easier transition. So the more this happens and the more we get used to it, I think it's going to be far less jarring. Right now, everybody's in shock. So obviously we're figuring it out and it's weird. But as we go on, I think you're going to see a lot of this start to kind of fall away, and it's going to feel a lot more kind of just business as usual.
I mean, and before we jump into the tech side of it too, because I definitely want to talk about that, I think another thing you can kind of compare this to is a transition that we've already made. What was that language called that broadcasters and radio announcers used to use? 1950s radio speakers where it'll be
Not mid-Atlantic accent.
Yeah.
Was it that?
I don't remember if it was mid-Atlantic, but it was
Or
like that.
transatlantic
Language
accent.
or accent.
Thank you for tuning into the news tonight.
like
and it was
announcer voice, yeah.
Yeah, the very
transatlantic accent.
Yeah, the old 1950s announcer voice.
Yeah.
That also fell away in favor of people acting more like people. And I think that's some of that transition is kind of similar to what we're going through now, where
And
people
Styles,
want more...
I heard a voice actor talk about this too, where it's like if you listen to if you go and look at videos of ads throughout the last 50 years, you will hear those shifts absolutely happen. The appetite of the sorts of way people expect to be talked to and want to be talked to has always kind of been this evolving thing, and so the same thing is just happening with media. It's just as it hasn't really happened in broadcast for a long time.
Yeah. That's definitely an interesting transition, but...
I know. I think I have a weird perspective on things because, as more and more stuff gets brought into homes and whatnot, I have to realize that, my job is working at a studio and being one of a crew of, sometimes 50 people putting a show on. So if it becomes the norm that an anchor is just holding up an iPhone and doing it from their house, then it starts getting really worrying.
I think there will always. I think there's no need to worry because there will always be. It's a sense of scale, and it's really just a question of what do broadcast networks want to. Well, let's be honest, pay for. And
Nothing. They don't want to pay for a damn thing.
well, exactly. but there will always be occasion for something that is big, that is glitzy, that needs that needs all of that equipment and needs people who are very good at operating it. So
Well,
I don't think
it could
anyone
also
who's
be
I
with
just,
different
I just
tech
want
has a reason to
I want the
worry.
next inauguration to be Trump with a fucking selfie stick.
might
Goes
get
up
your
there and
worship
is like,
this rate.
"Hello."
I had the longest selfie stick of anybody in the crowd.
Oh my god, I've had the longest selfie stick of any person who's ever been inaugurated before.
But I think another thing that makes it context appropriate is the whole "we're all in this together" feeling, right? Like seeing your late night show hosts at home, being cozy with their family. I feel like that's kind of this weird feeling where it's like, yeah, like guys, we're all in this together, but we're gonna get through it, this crisis. And so I think that also helps a little bit with the context. But so to jump into the tech side, so obviously there is Skype and there is Zoom, even though Zoom's, God.
Let's not.
don't use Zoom. Just don't use Zoom.
Please,
Zoom-
Someone in the chat was like, "Should we use Zoom for
It has so
Google
many
Hangout
privacy
meetings?" And I
issues.
was like,
it's so
"No."
bad.
And
Does
memory
Facebook
and
own them,
bugs
or-
and flaws?
I don't know. There's so much stuff. It's everything from like flaws where like other people who run the meeting can see your DMs to other users to like they were asking for root permission on Mac OS and like bypassing all
0
the
days
permissions.
today, though.
There were 0 days exploits. There's like it's bad, man.
Yeah, just don't use Zoom.
Yeah, don't use it. But besides Zoom, there are obviously, if once you do have maybe some grips stopping by at the house, with some hand sanitizer and saying, "All right, guys, let's set something up." What
Here's some choices.
do you do? Like, how do you get broadcast video like near real time from like some person's house to?
It depends on who you're dealing with. I think oftentimes because my mom has her monthly book club and she's like, "Oh yeah, so we're gonna do it over." I'm like, "Video." I'm like, "Okay, what are you using?" She's like, "I don't know. What would you recommend?" And I'm like, "Well." So this is if they're a video gamer, I'd recommend Discord or someone who is technically apt.
the Twitch streamer, and he was just like, "This is the moment I was made for."
But for mom,
I'm just
I was
waiting for your mom to have like, 1 million subscribers on Twitch and be like
That'd be awesome.
getting
Wouldn't that be-
fucking Patreon money. And she's like,
yo,
"Oh,
it's
honey,
like-
I picked up this new hobby. I don't know if you've heard of this website. It's called Twitch. Anyway, I'm in like the top 10 now and I frag noobs all the time."
They went ahead and used Google Hangouts on it, and she was like, "The video quality was really bad." I'm like, "Yeah, that's Google Hangouts. You get used to that."
Yeah. Yeah, Freeze. What do you,
The
what have you
video,
been-
the
what have you
video
been-
quality. I was gonna say the video quality is terrible. They say with terrible cameras, terrible lighting, terrible backgrounds, terrible angles.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's. But I mean, these studios. I mean, you especially CNN. It's like it's immaculately lit. I mean, the cameras are all downsampling 4K.
No, they're generally 1080.
Really?
Yeah, there's. I mean, they went HD and then they said, "Well, we don't have to buy new cameras. We went HD." So a lot of them are still using the old cameras.
The old camera. Well, because they spit out 1080i, right? Because that's still the
we're
HD
just,
SDI.
we're just using 1080i. News as a whole is predominantly 1080i. Like, I don't think there's anyone who's using 4K and downsampling on the regular. I think it's a couple studios here and there, or maybe they have 4K cameras, but they're still running them in 1080. I don't think there's anyone who's doing 4K production.
Yeah. What kind of stuff have you seen for doing like home linking to studio?
So honestly, it kind of depends on who the person is and what the budget is. Al Roker put out a bunch of tweets where he showed off, he had 2 iPhones and an iPad, and the main iPhone was running a Live View application, which interfaces with a piece of hardware back at the studio and just streams video to it. And then he has another iPhone that he's watching the program return feed on, and then he has an iPad just for teleprompter. It's literally as simple as that sometimes, and they give him a little lav mic to plug into the phone so that they can hear him better.
Yeah.
It's better than just phone quality mic. So like even relatively simple setups get complicated because you're literally dealing with 3 devices you have to juggle and mount and hold and whatnot.
Right, because you got to communicate with the host, and then you've got to control the camera, and then you've got to that's a lot of like audio and video feeds back and forth.
And sometimes in addition, they're using like another cell phone with a phone call, and they're using that for queuing, just because there's like a 2-second delay, no matter what you do, just because of the internet, with all the videos. So
For like the director's feed.
Yeah, for the director talking to the host. So they might just be using a standard telephone line to talk to them.
That's nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just because I guess it's reliable, and you don't really care about the quality for,
Yeah, you
just
you
queuing.
need to transmit voice with low latency and high reliability. Name something better.
Yeah, it can be difficult, especially, mission critical. It can honestly be kind of difficult. And I imagine, like, most of the average house, good luck getting an ISDN line linked to some person's house.
It kind of terrifies me how much of the world is still reliant on POTS lines.
No, I work in IT. I'm used to it. There's still T1 lines, T1 circuits. There's still ISDN and what's the other one? PRI circuits. That's another one. Which PRI is basically like digital voice over like a T1 circuit, and it's everywhere, man. Like, and even if it isn't, like, for instance, I have a client that has a ton of PRI lines for their phone system. No, it's all run over fiber. It's all run over like a 5 gigabit backhaul link or whatever, but it's all emulating fucking T1 circuits into some old ass phone box that all it wants is T1 circuits, and it's like, really?
Is a T1 line still like $1,000 a month?
They're not usually 1,000. It's more, so it gets kind of complicated because half of what you're paying for is the actual circuit, which is usually kind of expensive, but the other part of what you're paying for is the actual transit on it. And one thing that's cool about stuff like T1 circuits and similar stuff is they will guarantee things like your latency. So once you start getting into like the dedicated, wavelength and dedicated fiber and everything like that, companies like Spectrum, Verizon, whatever backhaul company you're working with, they will actually say, hey, you will get 3 milliseconds or less to our California data center, and if it's over that, then we owe you money.
Really?
So it's guaranteed.
Yeah, it's guaranteed. And that's the big difference between a lot of the, not just like business class internet in quotes, but like a dedicated fiber link from one of these companies that like, even the cable companies will actually do fiber if you're willing to pay, thousands of dollars a month or whatever. But the chances
is this for audio and video, or is this more just for?
Oh, for anything. I mean, you can get SDI backhaul links to,
We're just talking about assured bandwidth.
Yeah. Well, I think, so the issue with this though, right, is the short notice. Because you can absolutely pay thousands of dollars for a last mile backhaul link that will take a bunch of SDI inputs from one building in Washington D.C. and bring it up to New York City, and be guaranteed, and have multiple route failure modes and everything. But the thing is, when you want to just do that at some person's house and you don't know how long you're going to need it, and also everybody's not supposed to be near each other, it's like, fuck.
So I will say in DC, there is a massive fiber network just for broadcasting with hookups basically over the entire city, like the White House, the Capitol, basically going to every broadcast studio head end. So instead of having to park a SAT truck outside of the Capitol every time, you just plug into the wall and get routed downstairs in the fiber room, and it just sends a fiber feed out to a mysterious box somewhere that gets sent back out to your network. So you can do
kind of like the subways always kind of having been like the New York subways having been there since forever, and it's kind of like just being an assured service. This is the same way, just for your links.
Yeah, you just rent how many fiber lines you need in and out of whatever important building, and however many you need into your home base. Which is great if you're doing stuff at the Capitol, but it is terrible if you're doing stuff in Arlington and you're having to, your options are park a SAT truck outside for a couple months or do it all over IP. And most places are doing it all over IP.
So that's my question. Why not? I mean, I guess some of it is because, well, you need a crew, but why not just park a SAT truck outside of one of these news anchors' houses, when they're at home?
They're expensive. Satellite time is still ridiculously expensive, in addition to the truck costing a lot of money. But two, if you have people needing to just hop on, someone might have a show at 3 p.m., but if they have to be a guest or a panelist or something on a show at 10 and a show at noon, they're not going to have the truck crewed and ready to go all day. They just want the anchor to be able to flip a switch and go on air.
Yeah.
I would love, I remember we toured CNN, like really toured CNN, not just, you went up the escalator and several years ago. And one of the guys we talked to for a while, who was helping us give the tour, was one of the satellite techs, one of the satellite bookers. Like, and his job was coordinating time blocks and their purchase and management of time on their satellites. And it was insanely fascinating. I remember very little of it, but it was insanely fascinating to hear him talk. And I was like, that's one of those rabbit holes I'd love to dive into someday, because it sounds amazingly complicated and super interesting too. Just the whole, just actually how you use satellites to do live broadcast.
Satellites, the other downside with them is they have a ton of latency. Like, it's, you know, you think IP stuff is bad, and then you go and start doing satellite stuff, and you realize, oh crap, you know, we're getting 4 to 8 seconds of latency.
So, I mean, my other question is, even the editors, and you say, oh, well, you can do editing from anywhere with a laptop. Well, sure, but in a newsroom, you know, you might have a big Avid system, and you might have a huge editing workstation and a dedicated, so, like, are those people still going into work and editing the shows, or is there some person who's just lucky enough to take a laptop home? Or
some people are getting laptops. You know, everything's kind of over the network, so you can work with proxies and very slowly edit through stuff. But the people who are doing the mission critical editing of, like, you know, this has to go on air in an hour, they're going in. Fortunately, the edit bays are all
isolated rooms. Yeah.
They're all isolated separate rooms, and they're just saying, like, okay, well, this is going to be your room for the next, you know, 6 months.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention for some people, if they're not familiar with video editing stuff at this level, proxy being basically how you would say.
Well, the idea is, like, if you're editing 4K video, which is huge, instead you edit a crappy 720 version, and then when you're done with the edit, you swap out with the 4K version, but the edit is the same. It's just that way you don't have to work with the huge files the whole time. You only have to do it at the end. Yeah.
So instead of downloading, you know, 200 gigs worth of files, you're downloading, you know, 20.
Well, and in case, you know, people don't know the scale of, like, an Avid system, I mean, you know, it's one thing to edit video that you shot on 2 or 3 cameras, you know, in DaVinci Resolve or Premiere or Final Cut or whatever. But it's another thing when you have 20 journalists and stock footage and, you know, 2 different narrators and an interview with 6 different people that you're trying to put together in a news package. And it's like, you need to just be able to pull all that stuff. And at CNN, that stuff's all on a local network. They have a big central database of all that stuff, not to mention all of your journalists, you know, in the next room over.
Yeah.
And it's like,
you also have to have it cataloged in a way where if you go in and search, you know, Bush 41, everything that he's ever said that's been filmed will pop up. And you have to have multiple people working on not only the same clips, but the same project. Someone could be working on the A block of the show while someone's working on the B and the C. And, you know, they need to be able to have the same project open, where if you try that on any other piece of software, it just doesn't work.
Not to mention doing edits 5 minutes before it goes to air. And
a surprising amount of time.
Or a lot less.
Yeah, no, we're playing back from edit rooms. Like,
wow.
We're literally rendering the clip sometime. Like, this is not normal, but frequently if there's a last second change, we don't have time to put it on the EVS server to play it out properly. So it's just get 2 edit bays and have 2 people in there, and my computer just went to sleep, so hopefully the audio didn't just cut out.
Yeah, you're fine.
All right, cool.
Reminds me of stories where
but they
hear from.
So they literally have to, you know, get on a comm panel and route the output of their computers into what's going out to a couple million people.
That is horrifying.
That's why you have a backup.
Yeah.
It reminds me of stories I've heard from, like, Japan and places where people assume these shows are produced, you know, many months in advance. And I've heard stories of, we finished the episode, the render finishes, and someone literally takes a bike and runs the tape to the broadcaster just in time for the friggin' it's almost like sort of how South Park gets made each week.
Yeah, those are famous clips. It's kind of amazing how and I mean,
just
I suppose
in time broadcasting.
We say stuff about the context of Skype and all this stuff, but I feel like as, you know, video codecs get better and real-time encoding gets better and the internet gets better, it will get easier, but we're still going to have to teach Seth Meyers to use a lav mic.
Yeah.
And
it's
to use one best.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned codecs and whatnot, because, like, a lot of the hardware that's, like, appliances that are in use for doing this kind of stuff, they're still like JPEG 2000 and MPEG 2.
Wow. I mean,
Like,
some of that
then-
could be latency though, because like you can have like, although X264 is nice, like I'm sure that anybody who streams on Twitch knows like it's pretty decent. You have to churn a CPU for it, and B, it can be kind of unstable if something happens, and I can kind of see why they go with the
something
old
like
stuff.
JPEG 2000. It's intraframe, so if you lose a frame, you lose a frame. You don't lose, everything. You don't get that weird kind of blocky pixelated mess that happens when you lose like a keyframe on something like H.264.
Oh yeah, every frame is an individual image. Yeah, rather
Yeah.
than being tied to other frames. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, it also means that it's a constant quality and it's a constant bit rate. You don't have to worry about, well, this second's going to be, 20 megabit per second, and this is going to be, 2.
So what about
There's still an
Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
Now, I was going to say, and in all of this, though, there's still some, like we talk about all this change, there's still some fundamental psychological things that even time doesn't really change about how video and audio kind of work together and what kind of expectations are. Kind of we're talking about, if with enough time, people will get used to digital and except we were just talking about Seth Meyers. The first night he was back, he was just like, he was sitting in, I think, at the top landing of the steps in a what was very clearly had a vaulted ceiling, this big kind of main foyer hall of his house, and it sounded like crap. And it kind of reminds me of the thing you're always told in any video class or any video tutorial you ever
Yeah,
take.
he was just in a room. He was just like,
I hate you.
yeah, hey
I
guys,
hate you.
how's it going?
Go away.
It's just Seth Meyers. Hey guys, welcome to late night.
Now, if you pair that with the best 8K video in the world, you're still your mind is immediately going to notice that. And the truism is bad audio is always worse than bad video. And so they learned pretty quick. But for instance, just kind of a change in context isn't going to change.
My iPhone
that we
shoots
still
4K, so
detect-
it'll be fine.
jeez. We still detect as human beings bad audio far more obviously than we detect bad video.
Yeah.
So some things won't change.
Freeze is typing in our Google Doc. I was gonna ask how do the technical directors handle this? Like, are all the people in master control and are the directors still going in and how are they staying 6 feet away in the control room?
So let me start with the wrong parts of that sentence.
Okay. Go ahead.
The technical director in a newscast is the person who sits at the switcher.
Yeah, that was what I was saying.
Yeah, okay. So for them, basically nothing changes.
They still go and push buttons on the switcher and just scrub it down with sanitizer, I guess.
Yeah, and the directors are still coming in and directing. There's no real way to do that from home. What's funny is there's all these really small control rooms where everyone's crammed all tightly to each other and no one wants to breathe or touch anything. Like people are sitting down and immediately wiping every surface with like Clorox and Lysol wipes just to disinfect
Are they wearing
everything.
masks or are they?
Some people are, some people aren't. Obviously it's hard to talk on a comm panel if you're wearing a mask just because it's hard to understand already.
Cue camera 4.
No, but for the control room, not a lot has changed just because, it's sources coming in from a different room into theirs and they switch it.
Yeah.
What's kind of changed a lot is, the studio crews are getting sent home. You don't need a lighting guy because there's nothing to light in the studio. You don't need camera ops. I'm brought in a lot of times to do robo to control the cameras in the houses. But the video op who'd normally be shading the camera, instead of having actual controls on the camera, is just taking whatever feed comes in and color correcting the best they can through an SDI color corrector.
Wait a minute. You were controlling robotic cameras over a laggy video link?
Yes.
It's
so they actually had to put out an order. Basically everyone went in and tried it for about a week. And they decided that was a terrible idea. So they put out in that same document where they're telling people, don't ask the anchors to touch anything. They said, set your shot and don't touch it.
Well, just
Yeah,
because
might be
like,
best.
'cause otherwise the camera's gonna move. It's like a couple seconds of lag, right? So you're like, move to the left. Oh shit!
Well, so the controllers we're using actually show the latency between the controller and the camera head. And normally I pay no attention to it because I'm either doing stuff in the building or over fiber where it's close enough by that it's like, 5-10 milliseconds. It's really, really fast because it's like direct fiber. I looked at the latency because I was like, why does this suck? It was like 100 milliseconds between the controller and the camera head for not the video, but the control. So it took 1/10 of a second for the control signal to even get to the camera. And then the camera has to be encoded and sent over the internet back to us for us to even see it. So it is torture.
It's like getting pictures and video back from Mars.
Yeah, it takes a couple seconds. And if you want to feel like this is what it's like, go turn on your video game console and go on your TV and turn on every processing setting that you possibly can.
Okay.
Turn off
any game rule, no input lag.
Yeah, don't use any game mode. And then multiply that by about 4.
And now make sure the person is perfectly in the center of the frame. And remember, if you fuck up, 4 million people are watching.
Pretty much. There's a bunch of times the director was asking me to do stuff during the show, and I'd have to wait for them to be off screen. Like they'll have to cut to something else, and I could make the fix. Because there's after the first time, I was like, I'm not doing this live.
Isn't that how you're supposed to do it anyway, though?
No, I do on-air moves all the time. But
well, in studio when it's right there and you can do a nice, pan or whatever. But yeah, if it's
okay, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
In studio it's fine, just because there's no delay with normal Robo, or if you're standing behind a camera, you're standing behind the camera. But if there's any amount, it just becomes impossible to do.
What else about? I mean, I know some of the tech side of broadcast, but like, what else about like your floor managers and your, not just your regular show director, producer, but like, how else does it affect the way like the whole team communicates?
Well, so normally what would happen is, for queuing and whatnot, there would be a guy who's literally holding up cards that say 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Right next to the camera, and it feels old-fashioned, but it works really well. And in this new future that we're in, and he's getting cues from the assistant director, so not the director cuts the cameras, and the assistant director worries about timing and making sure that we have, we're going to commercial breaks at the right time, we have all the right things queued up. But the anchor is literally wearing an earpiece that they're just hearing, 30 seconds in. So they'll have someone just come in their ear suddenly, and, which it's never a thing you want to do too much, because it's hard to listen to someone talking and listen to someone else talking at the same time and process both.
It's like an air traffic controller almost kind of thing.
Yeah. Like you can read something and hear something, and it's kind of a lot easier to do that than listen to two voices and understand what's going on.
My big high-level question at the end of all of this is, after all of this is said and done, and this is a scary question, but I think it's worth thinking about, and I'm sure for people like you are thinking about this nonstop, what aspects of this are going to come back because they think, oh yeah, well, this is lacking and people want to see this again, and what aspects will be like, okay, the financial has had a chance to look over this all again and be like, you know what, we can finally take a look and really see what we can get with now. Like,
well, I really
how
hope
is
the
this going to
makeup
lasting?
Makeup artists.
They're going to get a raise at the end of this, I guarantee it.
Right.
No, but honestly, every anchor I've talked to, I was listening to Wait, Don't Tell Me, and they were saying, they're bringing anchors to the studio at gunpoint, but it's the opposite. It's the anchors are going, they want to go to the studio. Like, if they have their way, they're having the biggest crews possible. They're having, the most expensive tech, not because it's some status thing, but because it makes them look better.
Well, they're also it's a family, and I know,
Yeah.
at least for me, like, sometimes working from home feels a little weird. It feels like, and I know some people work from home constantly and everything, but for me, it always feels like work is invading my personal space. Like,
You need to have separation.
yeah,
Everyone
like,
says that.
here I am in my bed, and yet I'm at work. And it's just like that weird feeling of like, so I can understand, like, especially if you're like a late night host or something, you want to appear your best. You want to do your best. You want to make people
Yeah.
happy. And
It's kind of weird because, like, every office has, like, their unprofessional jokes and whatnot, but, like, in broadcast, it's basically a circus. So everyone's kind of, ragged and just a little, like, gruff. But, like, you kind of miss that. Like, even the people that you don't get along with because you butt heads with, it's like, oh,
You're still in
I
the
miss
trenches
this.
together.
Yeah, it's like, like you said, we're in the trenches together.
yeah,
Even
the people
coworkers I don't
the-
really like. It's like, oh, I kind of
the
miss
people I fear
fuckface.
for, the people I fear for though, honestly, are our local stations because they were already like 2 steps away from the grave anyway. You have these megacorps who are just like bean counters anyway, so it's kind of like if it's gonna be felt somewhere, I don't think network is gonna have a problem. I don't think a lot of cable is gonna have a problem. Broadcasts, like local broadcasts. I don't know, man. I think they might be looking for every single way they can shave a few dollars off.
Well, so they're low budget, but I think what this is doing is they're showing them that there's a lot of ways to get I think it's less about crew and more about tech. Like previously, they'd send people out with live view packs and cameras that would plug into them. Live view packs are basically a backpack that has a computer in it, and I think 10 to 15 cellular modems, like in your phone, and it bonds it all together to create a high bandwidth link. I think they're realizing that for stuff that isn't as critical, they can sort of kind of just send someone out with a phone. It's not great, but like if they only need to come to them for a minute, then it might be all right.
Yeah, I think there are, people have been kind of saying that too, like, oh, this is going to change late night and this is going to change journal. Well, it's like, no, I think what we've proved is that we enjoy the quality. We probably want to go back to it. But there are some things we can get away with. Maybe we, as long as the journalism is good, maybe it's okay that somebody's on a Skype call once in a while. But also, you don't need a crazy ass budget to pull off something that millions of people are still going to watch, right? Everybody's still watching the news to try to figure out what's going on with this whole crisis. And I think that kind of proves that point that, like, we do take for granted how professionally things are normally done, and we do want to go back to that. But it's all about that balance. It opened things up. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to be able to work from home now after this whole thing. It just means that, hey, we did prove that, maybe that job can be done from home. Or maybe we don't have to worry so much if this person wants to stay from home because they're sick. And that's the other big thing. As I've seen people that say, I don't mind going into work, but it pisses me off that, like, if I'm sick or if I'm on vacation, they don't want me to work remotely. And I feel like now we're moving into the stage where we're proving, no, you can do it from home. Maybe you don't want to all the time, but, it's doable. Don't say it isn't, because, look, we're pulling it off right now.
What I'm
my
hoping
biggest
is... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, we're talking about hopes. I suppose my biggest hope is that this really kind of distills down, kind of almost in an essentialist way, the things about broadcast and the things about professionalism and the visual things that we really, really care about, and then kind of drops away those other parts that no one really cared about in the first place, because that will engage people much more. That will allow the broadcast people to be closer and be more appealing to a whole new audience, and that will allow the digital people to be like, you know what, that's something I can't match. Maybe I can try harder in these areas to get. So I just hope it kind of boosts everybody up in the process.
Well, and this feeling that, like, oh, this person's a late night host. They're a star. They always need to be in a suit and tie, and they always need, $100,000 camera pointed at them. And it's like, no, now we're getting to the point where it's like, no, like, Stephen Colbert, when he's just making a YouTube video, he kind of seems like my friend. And that's more of a appealing thing. So maybe do that once in a while. Not all the time, but once in a while.
So I will say, like, digital gets shit on still, which is weird because, I think it's probably, don't quote me on the numbers, 50-50 people watching stuff online versus watching it live. I know when I watch stuff, I'm not watching the broadcast, I'm watching the clips on YouTube. And yet, the digital teams who are doing things specifically for the web are getting basically thrown table scraps of like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. And it's like, why? You're getting more viewers online of the demographic that you want than you are on broadcast.
I think that's a completely corporate mentality. That generation is just going to have to kind of retire and go away before that changes.
I forget what his name was from Rocket Jump. Who's the guy that owns Rocket Jump?
Oh God, I don't know.
Forget his name.
Freddie W.
Freddie W. He did a great interview with Corridor Digital where he was talking about that, where he was saying like, I've worked in digital my whole life. And even though we've had huge crews and we've had like multi-million-dollar productions, everybody goes, oh, well, yeah, but you've never worked on a real TV show. And it's like this weird thing where like it gets shit on, even though like there are real TV shows done by like shitty public broadcasters with, a tenth of that budget. There's this kind of... People feel like YouTube isn't real television, and I feel like this will kind of change that a little bit, where it's like, no, YouTube is real.
Joe Penna, who's Mystery Guitar Man, said the same thing on the same podcast. He was talking about, he's been making YouTube videos sometimes with, millions of dollars of equipment. He's done ads for web, he's done all sorts of stuff, and he did like one documentary. And he got chosen to direct a film, and he was talking to them, and it was like, yeah, so I'm really excited. You guys saw my videos, I like this and that. And they're like, videos? What do you mean? Like, we saw that one film you directed. And he's like, what? Like, I did that as a like throwaway bullshit side project. And he's like, oh, like the fact that he's got 100 million views on his stuff means nothing.
Yep, but, nothing, because it wasn't signed to a studio and it wasn't on a film projector at a movie theater. Yeah.
Now, some of that is just, unfortunately, and I hate to say it, but it's kind of true in my experience. Like, even if we're not, don't take this literally, but just, quote unquote, Hollywood. Like, it's just a Hollywood corporate mentality. People in development and the big towers in Hollywood are going to see what they're going to see. And even a new generation that comes through that is going to be very Hollywood-centric. Our big crews that we sanction, that are all this stuff. I think news, because news is grounded and, a little bit more in, let's face it, reality than Hollywood is, might be a little bit less uptight about that. And that might be a more generational shift along with the audiences. But I think for some of the more creative filmmaking stuff, some of that, obviously, I mean, YouTube is already amazing all around the world, but some things are never quite going to be equivalent as long as Hollywood is the way it's kind of always been.
Well, and it still has some...
I was going to say, I think a lot of the shift is happening in news and comedy, not so much because the tech is good enough, but because news and comedy both need to come out as fast as possible. They need to be topical and on point, otherwise they're not going to get viewers. And with like smartphones and live views and Skype, it's let them do that. The quality I don't think is quite there in a lot of cases. It's good, but it is obviously still not the same. But what I'm curious to see in the future is this going to come to other aspects of television? Are you going to see concerts that are done, smaller crews, cheaper cameras, going out live with a couple of cell phones, cutting between them with an app? Just because it's a small budget and, they only have a couple grand to work with, and instead of putting out nothing, they put out something that's not quite as good, but it's a thing that they can point at and say, we made this, instead of having nothing to bring to the table.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of that. I've seen two people saying like, here's this YouTuber who spent, $150,000 on gear and their friends that help them and their crew. I mean, you're maybe not Linus Tech Tips because they do get quite a lot of coverage, but those big YouTubers that put a lot of that effort in, and then here's Stephen Colbert with a cell phone and puts up a video and gets 1 million views. Some of that is because...
Honestly...
Go ahead.
Honestly, that's like the big reason why every time I hear like, oh, this YouTuber shoots with a Red, it's like, why?
Yeah.
It's like, if that guy can do it with a phone and he's getting more viewers and putting out better content. Why do you need a Red?
Yeah, and there's nothing
explain
wrong
it
with,
to me.
There's nothing wrong with like wanting to achieve higher quality, especially if you're a nerd and that's why you're into it. Like that's why I built my studio. But like, it does prove the point though that like who you are and the content you produce will always matter more, because if 1 million people are willing to sit and watch, Seth Meyers sit in a room that sounds like this. And listen to people. If 1 million people are willing to watch that and listen to that, then it's like, huh. Well,
with Linus Tech Tips, I find it funny that they bought all these Reds, and then they bought a bunch of Canon C200s, which are, Red is like, a fully kitted out package is 80 grand. C200 is like 8 grand. And all of the camera guys and editors are just like, well, just use the C200. It's easier to shoot with. It's easier to edit. It looks the same once we upload it to YouTube, and it just works better. Like, it's just a lot of the pizzazz, of using the expensive gear, I think just frustrates me at this point, because if you're not going to use it to its fullest potential, then don't. Like, spend the money on content and art and, design and buying more things to put in the video versus, like, the gear.
And why bother? Because you're not working for... This is a thing in, like, photography. Professional photographers, people... there's a thing of where sometimes when you're working for a client or when you're trying to even sell a client on using you, it does turn into, forgive me, a dick swinging contest. Do you have big gear for the sake of the client seeing you use big equipment that looks expensive?
Well, I mean,
as opposed to just something that's small enough as a cell phone, be like, well, do you really need?
So I do agree with
the amount
that.
of money
And
you want?
there are certain clients. I have a C300, not a humble brag, but clients will literally say, I need this camera. I need a C300. And I can hold my hand up and say, I have one. And they say, okay, you're hired. And I'm like, do you need to see a reel or credits or a list of anything I've done? And they're like, no, you have the right camera.
It's kind of unfortunate.
That is nuts.
It's happened before, more than once.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also thinking like a YouTuber that I watch a bunch, Tony Northrup, who does videos on photography. He was doing a video comparing two lenses, and there was this one lens that was like, $600 or $700 more expensive than another, and the one that was more expensive was sharper. It was cleaner. It was a better lens. But then he's like, the question that some person, and they were doing like a live show, somebody asked like, well, which one should I get if I'm going on like, my dream vacation? And he's like, honestly, here's the thing. Why don't you save $500 on the lens and spend the $500 on a helicopter ride where you're going to get much more memorable photos?
Thank you.
You know what I mean? Like, that helicopter ride is going to be more memorable, get you better photos, and impress people more than any amount of, like, it's like if you're throwing the photos on fucking Instagram.
Yeah.
He's like, give up. Like, don't, it's not worth it. So,
like, every time I think I want to go shoot it, like, all the people that I really like watching the videos that they shoot on YouTube, or on Twitter, I should say, they're all using like a Sony A7 and a little gimbal and whatnot. And every time I think about wanting to shoot a video, it's like, well, like, I've got all the really nice gear, but it's a pain in the fucking ass to use, and it's big and it's bulky, and I just don't want to use it just to run around and have fun. It's just too much work.
yeah.
Like, there becomes a thing where it's like the cheaper thing will get you better quality results because it's easier to use, where you just like, I put out a bunch of stuff on YouTube. I've been teaching myself ukulele, and I don't want to set up a big camera. I just use my phone, and the quality isn't as good, but who the fuck cares?
Yeah. There you
Like,
go.
I'm putting it on Twitter.
As long as you're having fun.
Yeah.
It's always what we've said, Paradox, about the stuff that you've done, which is the production quality, good production quality, really good production quality. It can get them in the door, and it will satisfy them very briefly. But ultimately, if the content isn't there, people aren't going to last.
Yeah, you got to.
It's not really what it's about.
You impress people with the first impression, but you're not going to keep them unless what you have to say is actually something relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, looping back around to what we were supposed to be talking about.
No worries. This is great. We should probably call it a show in a minute. But
yeah, I was going to say we're touching for a moment on the hardware that they're using in the home studios. In the last couple of years, there's been really big leaps that have come out in terms of, what is possible with IP transmission in the home. You know, when gigabit internet came out, it was a huge deal, and everyone's like, well, why do you need it? And it turns out that you need it because sometimes you might be doing, you know, your nightly newscast from your living room.
Has Lester done that yet? I haven't checked.
But I think Lester's at
David
home.
or any of those guys.
Yeah.
I want to see a weatherman in their house, just like against. I want to see a weatherman like in their kitchen, just looking out the window, talking about the weather that way, or like some other weird like. And some people are saying like, oh, they could do like a green screen and use OBS or something. No, I want to see a weatherman just like get really creative with how they like talk about the weather, or like have a whiteboard where they're like drawing like, and we're gonna draw a sun over here. We're gonna draw some clouds over here.
Paradox.
Well, so there's a bunch of people who installed green screens.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it's not hard these days.
Yeah, green screens are cheap, and if you just like keying it at the switcher, just send it over and put all the weather graphics in later.
Green screens are cheap, but lighting them is a pain in the ass.
You know, that's why you buy the nice lights and the cheap green screen. That's what I've learned over many years is you buy the nice lights and you buy the cheap green screen, because the green is going to be green no matter what, and the light can either be very good or very bad.
Yeah.
And those lights have outlasted 3 cameras of mine. So
There you go. Well, thank you guys for joining. This has been awesome.
yeah,
Anytime,
it's been
man.
nice.
Yeah. Well, we're all nerds, and we'll have to see where the industry goes.
Yeah. Wish me
And
luck.
talk about it every single day because we can't put this stuff down.
Yeah, pretty much.
I've got 2 shows left this weekend that are still in studio before they all get sent home. So wish me luck.
Use hand sanitizer. Wash your hands. Wash your pobs.
I was gonna say I don't have hands. I have palms.
Clean your beans.